Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. It is October 28th, 2025. This is episode 51, and we are ready to start. Anna is in the house, so I'm going to bring her onto stage. Hi, Anna. Good morning.
Good morning, Lisa. This is our morning show.
Our morning show. It's afternoon where I am, but okay.
Right.
We'll split the continent that way.
Yeah.
So anyhow, good. Well, you're looking perky this morning.
Perky, yes. Yes, I'm perky. That's a good word for me. I've been out causing all sorts of rumbles and shakes.
Oh, I hope so. I think that's great. Like shaking the trees.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't think any of us are ready for what's going to happen here in the very near future. I feel like the night I gave birth to our son, it was also a dark, stormy night in November. And you feel like you're involved in some sort of ineluctable, gigantic process that you have no control of. And, you know the basic outlines of it, but you don't know the details.
Right.
So there's this odd sense of, yeah, but you don't know. And so it's a similar feeling, and it's a similar process. Rebirthing a government is like a birth process.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had several veterans talk to me and say, it's like waiting on the eve of a battle. Again, you feel like you're involved in this gigantic process that you have no control of. And the gist of it, but you don't know the details.
Right. I mean, it's there are sometimes, I have to say every week or all the time, I pray for wisdom. I've done that regularly since I was a child, because I recognize that the only way I'm going to get through whatever's going on is through a divine wisdom that's going to come and help direct. When I don't know what to do, I always say, okay, tell me what to do. Download me, right? So, it really, that anticipation that's there is whether or not things are going to work the way you think they will. How will you adjust? And my husband this summer gifted me with a T-shirt that says Plan B, because I'm always talking about Plan B, and sometimes C, D, E, F, and G. So,
yeah, but it's a very strange time in our country's history. It's a strange time for us personally in many respects. The prayer I have constantly prayed since I was young was simply to be blessed and be a blessing to others. And certainly I think that has been answered. But the sense of kind of, I don't know how you could put that, anticipation. It's not exactly anxiety, because you do know what's going on. The big picture scope of what has to happen. But it is sort of an anticipatory lull. There's this quiet before the storm sense in the air. And that's probably appropriate, because a lot of changes have to be made, and they have to be made fast to make the difference that we need to make. Okay? So someone last night told me that 81% of the people on food stamps are foreigners. I don't believe that.
No. I don't either, because I know statistically, rural America is probably one of the highest concentration of poverty level in our country. It's very, and I know that statistics from when I was a principal, and it still stands the same. that, within rural America, that's very much the case. So,
Right. And it's a horrible statistic. And it's an ironic statistic that those who feed the rest of us go hungry themselves. That's something that we're going to change.
I agree. It's always humbling when you see in the poorer communities and sometimes in the homeless community, they take care of each other. They might have only one, but they'll share half, you know, just to help you get along. So it's very humbling to watch that, observe that, and participate in that. They're so grateful. And helpful to each other. And we have to kind of break those bonds of holding on to things and be able to get out there and do the same.
Well, I think people need to sober up. And, whether it's 40 million illegal aliens or it's 40 million Americans doesn't really matter, because they're 40 million people. And 40 million people who are hungry need to be taken care of. They need to be addressed. They can't be shoved under rugs. We're not going to stand by and let them starve in front of us, even if we have our own food supplies. No, this is not going to pass. And so the Democrats in Congress and the president, who hasn't come clean about the whole circumstance, and everybody involved in trying to cover up what's actually happening and why, shame on them. Shame on them, because it's a disservice to lie by omission. And there's been utterly too much of that that's gone on during this entire time that the Holy Roman Empire and the British government have been in here, quote unquote, providing services under false pretenses. They needed to come clean at the end of the Civil War and didn't. And it's been a constant process of obfuscation and self-interest ever since. And even now, as the bankruptcy of the United States is grinding to its close, and even as the obvious repercussions of that are hitting our country, we still have members of the Trump administration who are obviously advising the president to do things that are not correct, that are not honest. It's not like he's going out there and deliberately lying, but on the other hand, he's not telling the truth by omission. If you don't tell people what the elephant in the room is, then you have omitted the truth just as effectively as if you'd told a big fat lie to replace the truth. And I think that what we're dealing with here is all the more disconcerting simply because nobody comes forward and tells the people, okay, this is what's happening, and this is what we're going to do about it, and this is how this happened. Be calm, we're going to work through it, it's all right. I think that would be a far more productive and useful way of dealing with the problem than just kind of standing there and going and letting everybody suffer for no good reason. And that's what I object to, is letting people suffer for no good reason, letting people walk into this without being prepared, letting people wonder and be scared and not know what's going on. That to me it's unconscionable. It's mindless. It's irresponsible, reckless, stupid. Okay.
Well, criminal, because we already know that in their underground facilities, their dumps and things, they're stocked to the gills. To the gills for years and years. And so, those food sources could just as easily be deployed to the hungry and the needy. It's the same as housing and everything else that has that is so seriously wrong in their world. It's just wrong.
Right. Well, so anyway, Mr. Trump is keeping his lips zipped, and all the rest of the world leaders are, either confused, really don't know what's going on, or are pledged to silence for one reason or another. I've been telling people for a long, long time to be prepared to, put aside some extra food and some extra fuel and some extra drinking water, and to make provisions for yourselves, because we are looking at a situation where we could have some pretty long-term problems.
Right. Right.
And it could last for several months. I mean, so my intention certainly is not to let it last several months. Our intention is clear before us, to get our bank system launched, and to get our community organized, and to take charge of delivering relief to everybody, and not with strings attached.
Right.
So this is our program is simply centered on, okay, well, here's the mess that our public servants have caused. Here's our solution as their employers, and just make it a very simple, straightforward manner of distributing the means of communication and wealth and food resources and everything else back out to the people, so that the people can then reform the government and make the changes that are necessary.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be important that everybody realize that they need to stock their do a little stocking in terms of their freezers, their protein resources, if you've got a little garden and can winterize it or cold frame it, to do that, so that you've got, some food sources. It's just make sure that your medical supplies, your basic supplies are stocked up, that you've got, plenty of soap and those kinds of things that sometimes we don't even think about, right?
Garbage bags.
Exactly.
Matches.
Well, actually, there's a real easy way. And when my son was in grade school, we had the dreaded science fair projects, that everybody dreads every year. And my youngest son, when he had his science fair project, we did kitchen recycling, basically. And what we found was we could use red worms and large, like Rubbermaid containers and soil, and we could recycle probably 95% of kitchen scraps. And then the rest of it could be easily taken out and boxes, burned or put into recycling or whatever that was coming through, or used for garden cover. Those types of things. You can shred it up and use it to garden with, and use it for mulch and things. And so the first year that he did his project, it was just about getting the worm colony established. And we did that very successfully, to the point where it was kind of funny. His science teacher gave him a C, and the state of Ohio gave him an award for vermiculture, and had him do seminars all over the states to the agricultural extensions who were having troubles getting their vermiculture established. And it necessitated his teacher and having to change his grade. The next year, what we did is we experimented. I helped him experiment and guided him in experimentation on using that for fertilizer, and the collection of the worm castings for that. And then the year after that, we used it for liquid fertilizer, and showed the difference between dry fertilizers and liquid fertilizers, and what plants did better with one than the other. So that's something that can be started right now that would cut down a great deal on trash bags. and it's much better for the environment as well. So very useful for your garden.
Absolutely. And those are things that we can do to improve our soil and our gardening, and the amount of minerals and other beneficial content that's nutritious into our food. We don't understand that in the modern world anymore. We've become so dependent on petrochemical-based fertilizers that the soil has lost its structure, and the biome that supports natural growth has been undermined.
Right.
And so, like so much else that was brought to us by the petrochemical industry, there were great blessings and there were great problems created by the, I should say, unmindful development of the petrochemical industry.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, we just have to begin to think about a little smarter, realizing that, not only do our pharmaceuticals come from natural sources, our food doesn't just come from the grocery store, and, it comes from those natural sources, and we have to be willing to begin to take up those, in a way, arts to be able to provide for ourselves again and for our neighbors.
Well, we've talked about the Amish community there in Pennsylvania, and New York, and numerous eastern Ohio.
Has a tremendous amount of Amish.
They have wisdom to share.
Yes, they do.
Sometimes progress is going back.
Correct. That's right.
And so
we've made quite a few inroads with our Amish. So we've got quite a few assembly members that are Amish.
Yes, we were talking about that one day here on the show, about how to get them to a point where they have access to their funds without having to take a photograph, which of course is not something that a lot of Amish will tolerate.
Correct.
So anyway, how's that going, Lisa?
Well, just in the last month, I want to say we've added about 12 Amish to our rolls here on Ohio, and really within the Amish community, being very respectful of the resources that they have, setting up in a way some private trade with them between some of our assembly members has really helped the communication. They're very, in some ways, very wary of us, what they call the English, and which rankles me, but but they're becoming more open. They recognize that there are things that are wrong, and they just don't. And the more the government pushes, the more they're beginning to realize that what we're telling them is true. And they can go back through some of their older stories and generations, but it's each sect of the different Amish communities and families in their religious tradition it is work to get to establish those relationships, and the relationships have to be established first, to let them know that we are genuine, that we are honest, that we are, not scamming them for anything. And so they're starting to make some very great inroads into the community. We have two men that are particularly local to their area and have been really working on it, and word spreading. So, once that really starts to catch and there's more that comes out with it, the more we will see. So,
well, and this is something I wanted to emphasize to everybody, as some of the supply chains and things break down, and we have to rely more on our own resources. And as the banking system breaks apart, as it will, what we need to do is not only make advantage of our banking system, but our vendor system. If you have goods or services that you want to sell, then by all means, get yourself a business that's there on the vendor roster at Global Family Bank, so that when people are looking for what you have to sell, whether it's soap or cheese or timber or whatever it is that you have to sell as commodities or as services, get it on our vendor list.
That's right.
And start trading with those who are of a like mind to you, so that you're not supporting the beast. Okay, so that you're living in your own world, that you are creating your own economy, and you have business standards that are in line with the overall intent of what our government is designed to do. And I've often said that the only reason to have a government is to protect the people and their assets. That's it. That's the only job of government. But the job of the people in their self-governance, well, that extends to a great many things. That extends to maintaining your own mental health and physical health. That extends to taking care of your family and your community. There are so many other aspects of life that only we as individual people can undertake, and that a government has no, well, number one, has no ability to do anything about, and no right to do anything about. That, in our tradition of self-governance, it begins with each one of us self-governing us, and then from there, it extends out into the community.
Right.
The important point here is that as we are engaged in this process of self-governance, part of our self-governance is, who do we buy from? Why do we buy things? What's a need and what's a want? These are questions that in this consumer-based society haven't been asked often enough. But we're going to be in a position now where this is going to be important. It's going to matter who you buy from. It's going to matter why you buy something. And it's going to matter whether it's feeding into our economy or it's feeding into some other economy. Now, I've had some real questions. I'm going, we have so few people compared to the vast mass of the population who are in a position to open up their little dashboard and start using their money to buy things, whether in our vendor economy or in the economy at large. But I have to believe that those of you who do have global family accounts will be generous and kind and make every effort to take care of the needy in your particular area of the country. And, of course, you'll take care of your own family. You'll take care of your extended family, your friends. That's to be expected. But also open up your hearts toward those who are not your family or your friends, toward those who are just simply in need. And do it regardless of their skin color or their religion or anything else. Just make it happen, Captain, because you're going to have the resources to make a significant dent in all of this suffering that the evil ones have planned for the population at large. And you should be using those resources to bring relief and to bring help. And don't worry about not having the resources there, because they will be. The whole situation is It's sort of like my mother used to say, water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. Well,
Yes.
we have vast amounts of wealth that have been cashiered and used as slush funds and abused as insurance scams, tax scams, mortgage scams, you name it. And deploying that wealth back into the population and into the people that it belongs to, and using it to rebuild a sane economy and to make it possible for people to have a decent life in the transition period, that is more important than anything going forward, because we have to preserve life. Okay.
Right. Well, I also expect that, if you look at any kind of economic theory, what always made America pretty great was its small business environment, its mom and pop shops. And many of those have disappeared because the big boxes, the big corporations came in and could undercut them and outbuy them and all of those things. And that's going to be something that when those large corporations can no longer operate in that way, we're going to have to bring our mom and pop shops back. And being able to reinvest and assist them in getting them up and rolling, maybe some initial inventory or whatever for them, and encouraging that small trade, that small business. That's our economic engine right there. What we can do and how we can provide. That's where we would be successful.
Right.
So
that's our vendors.
Exactly. That's our vendors right there. So the whole concept is really, I'm not so worried about that, because I know that need is usually the mother of all inventions, right? So we have an ingenuity within the American people that's there. It will waken. It will. And it might get a little tough in between, but I guess I was fortunate to grow up in a family that went through the Great Depression. And I remember the stories of my grandmother and grandfather, my father, and when there was no work for the men and the men were depressed. And sometimes it was the kids, like my father, who went out and captured rabbits and he captured doves. And then he started breeding them and selling them to the hotels for food, because they couldn't get food either. But he was supplying it, and it was also supplying his family with the needed, whatever they needed to be able to provide for themselves as well in their basic needs. He was six
Yep.
years old. So
Yep.
built his own little cages, did the whole thing. So, those kinds of things will emerge. And, we have to realize that those times are coming, and we're going to have to be really creative about what we do.
Well, yeah, and pull together, just this morning I had to, write a note to a county assembly that was accusing their state assembly of lying, and accusing the state assembly of crimes, and it's this whole legalistic mindset that is so deeply indoctrinated in people. They sent me a diatribe that was 67 pages long of minutia of this very legalistic idea that they were being somehow harmed, and they hadn't been harmed at all, really. They just hadn't stepped forward and done the work and helped the people that were trying to set up the state assembly. And so as a result, there was acrimony instead of community. There was this legalistic, picky, small-minded rules-based kind of idea that, oh, we're going to, prosecute and persecute and that's nonsense. This is not where we're at. This is not where we're going. Where we're going, there are going to be 2 laws and 2 courts, and that's it. The 80 million statutes are gone. The complex legal system with all these different courts and all these different jurisdictions and all of that, gone. The taxes, gone.
Right.
All that stuff is going out the door. That's not what we're bringing back in the door. All right. We're not doing that anymore.
Yep.
So
They need to stop. They just need to stop.
Right.
And, you and I've talked about it many times before, Anna. This is where it's really important that our states develop first, because it is in that state developing and getting the people and getting things kind of set, and then the counties coming up behind it, that creates that circular support from everything.
Right. And there's no competition between the states and the counties because they're in different jurisdictions.
And,
Totally.
we just went over that this morning in our, we have a Tuesday morning coffee, and we were going over jurisdictions, and somebody said, well, can you make a chart of jurisdictions? I said, how big would you like that? Would you like that 14 feet by, 20 feet, or, how would you like that? Because, there are thousands of jurisdictions. I said, let's start with your jurisdiction, your personal jurisdiction. You know where your house sits? That's your personal jurisdiction. I said, your neighbor? Oh, that's their personal jurisdiction. Would you like me to continue? And so, it's so hard for people to understand jurisdiction, but jurisdiction means boundary.
Right. It's where you can speak to something. You have standing.
Where your rights end is where someone else's rights begin. And we have to begin to understand that we're in our government, where some of the processes and procedures of our assemblies start, and they end is where the counties start and end. And so
Right.
it's just, I said, drop a pebble in a lake, watch the rings. There's your jurisdictions. Every one of them just keeps expanding. So it's I know it's tough, but that's what our people have to realize, and in all of the infighting that is going on, we have to begin to realize, there was a great book during I think it was in the 90s, called Win-Win, right? And we have to learn to negotiate and get and be diplomatic about it, so that our ideas are heard and someone else's ideas are heard, and they're melded together, and we come out with something that works. And that's what a lot of assemblies don't understand. They just don't understand that it's give and take. It's give and take. It's that constant back and forth of give and take until we get something everybody can live with and grow with.
Right. And also their responsibility to both. There's this ingrained, we were taught to think divisively. That was ingrained to us from the educational system. When we were babies, we were given a group of blocks and asked to identify them in terms of their differences instead of their similarities. Okay? So our minds are kind of hardwired into an us or them paradigm, an either or. And instead it should be and.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to an and paradigm. We're going to an inclusive, cooperative, unified idea of life. We're going to be looking at this not in terms of either or, we're going to be looking at it in terms of and. So when you're looking at county assemblies and state assemblies, you're going to realize that these two things work together to cover an entire spectrum of life. you're going to realize that the county is responsible for your daily experience of life. And your state underlying the county is responsible for your overall security and the larger scale quality of life that your society has. So you're going to need both, and they're very different. So, accept it. Accept the fact that your county is going to hold the greatest power within your county borders. Your state is going to hold the greatest powers within your state borders, and you need both of them.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So I'm going to show this real quick because that's the book.
There it is.
You want to learn how to negotiate? You want to learn how to solve some of those issues, how to be diplomatic? That's a great book to start with.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And think of it in terms of community. Don't think of it in terms of us or them. Think of it in terms of a community that has many layers and faces. You're part of a multilateral community. Every single one who walks into a state assembly is also walking into a county assembly. Because why? Because you live within a county that is within a state. It's like, Russian nesting boxes, you got the little doll in the middle, and then you got the bigger dolls out from the outside. Well, it's the same thing. And none of them can be undermined or harmed without bringing harm to the whole. Right. So, concentrate on building your state. And I know this has been an object of concern and consternation and wonderment. Now, why should we build the state first? Shouldn't we build the county first and then build up from there? Well, the fact is that when you build the counties, you're building a different state. Okay, when you build the counties, you're building a union state out of the union of all those counties. And your union state has no voice in international affairs. So do you want at this moment to have no voice and no presence in the international stage? You'd better hope not. Okay, you want your international state active. You want to be able to speak to the rest of the world and prove that you exist and that your government is still here. So cease and desist, right? If you've got the largesse to build a county, and there are a few places in this country where we have the resources and the people and everything to build a county assembly. Well, we're kind of testing the process there. But be aware, you're not competing against the state assembly. The state assembly is its own thing. It's its own jurisdiction, and you have a part of that too. And you need to be involved in your state assembly and promoting it and helping it to grow and to function and to be fully functional before you worry about doing your county assembly for the most part, because the state assembly is not only where we logistically end up after we come home from the sea, right? But it's also the voice that we desperately need in international affairs, because we have been misrepresented as having no longer existing and having been vacated from the land and soil. So we desperately need to get our states properly grounded and set up and standing, doing what they need to do. And then, as we can, build up the counties to build the union state behind it. Each and every one of you walked in and you were someone from, say, Pierce County, Wisconsin, or Yavapai County, Arizona. Okay? You have a state and you have a county, and you're responsible for both. But at the present time, our focus is on building the state, not the county, because number one, the state is our doorway back home. We can't get to a county without going through a state. And so we need to have our states up and operating as we are bringing all these people in from the sea jurisdiction to the land jurisdiction. All right? So that's number one. This is why we have the states first. This is why we did not organize the county level first. All right? There's a direct connection between the sea and the land. They're both international jurisdictions. They go together like peas and carrots, okay? So you've got these two jurisdictions that butt up against each other just like this, and you can easily go from the sea to the land or from the land to the sea. But you can't get to the soil until you go to the land.
Right.
This is the state we're building, the land jurisdiction state known as the State of the Union. All of the members of the Federation of States are states of the Union. And all of the states that are formed from the counties are union states. The union states control the national soil jurisdiction. And
Right.
that's why we're called nationals, okay? But
Exactly.
the states of the union, union states, states of the union, are our international voice. They're the ones that conduct international business. They're the ones that stand for you in international affairs. And they're the members of the Federation of States, which has the ability and the mandate to represent the states in international affairs according to the best interest of the states in international affairs. So, in order for you to have a government that's present, that can function, that can make decisions, you have to have your state assembly up and rolling. We were only able to do the things we've done, such as enrolling the Western states as true states of the Union. We could only do that because your state assemblies were in General Assembly, and we could pose the question and take a roll call vote.
Right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
You know, if there's one clip everybody takes out of this session, it's this discussion right here. Because our jobs of our counties right now, while our states are forming, are outreach and education. That's really true, because without the outreach, we won't have people. And you won't have people to really organize your county. And without the people, without them being educated, you're not going to have enough people to really run your county assembly knowledgeably enough to really do good. And so our concentration isn't on standing our counties, it's on getting people in our counties, outreaching and educating them. Then
and
you can
talking to your neighbors, getting to know your neighbors. Who else in your county is a member of the state organization? What are the county's issues? You can research and develop all of this without any kind of acrimony or competition or criticism or nothing. You can just get together and say, okay, well, this is our county, and we've identified ourselves as Americans, and okay, so what are the issues that are facing our county?
Right. We don't have to worry about who's king of the heap. We need to worry about how we're going to get a heap.
There are no kings. There are no kings in our world.
No kings in our world, right?
We have neighbors. We don't have kings.
That's
okay?
right. That's right.
Boy, this was brought home to certain parties that were, the scope of the work that we've done and the importance of the work that we've done has finally come home to the DC elite. And so they were running around and scratching their heads and trying to come up with some new fancier title for me. Queen this and that, and blah, blah, blah. I suggested grandma. And that just that ended the whole conversation. They just kind of looked at me like, because really, think about this. it, it, um, there's this is the whole thing was born out of love and concern for country and countrymen. Had nothing to do with power or position or money or anything else. It was just purely, this isn't right. We have to do what we can to stop it and to change it in order for people to have good lives, in order for the country to flourish. We have to do this. And so it was done. But it is totally not a hierarchical endeavor. Self-governance begins with governing yourself to have right goals and values and to discipline yourself to be the kind of person that is trustworthy, that tells the truth, that thinks things through, that has a heart, that has a mind. Okay, your first job is to get you into order, right? To get control of yourself so that you can govern yourself. You know why you believe something. You know why you don't believe something. You know, you have a mastery of who you are. You've made a decision, a conscious decision to tell the truth or not. You're not just kind of floating along, letting the wind blow you any which way it goes. You're actually governing yourself according to your values, according to your own system of what matters. Okay.
Sure. Absolutely. Go read the bottom of the pillars, right? Those
Yeah.
are the things that we're trying to do. Those are the principles we should be embracing and bringing forward in our call to duty, right? Because that's
Right.
that's what you're hearing. That drumbeat that you hear is the call to duty. And we have a duty to our fellow man to make sure that we're all living lawfully. And, you know, it's that's what it is, period. So
Right.
go read those founding principles again. Go
Yeah.
watch episode 1. So
We're all little bricks. We're all little bricks in the wall, right? We're all standing here against murder, mayhem, and criminality. And we have to have our own little brick good and solid. We have to know who we are. And so, you could offer me all of the power and pelf of the world, and it wouldn't make a bit of difference because I know who I am, and I'm grounded.
right.
I'm not susceptible to such temptations. I'm not susceptible to, thinking that you know, that I'm the cheese. No, no, I'm not susceptible to that kind of thinking because I've already thought it through. I've already governed myself. And that's what we each and every one of us have to do.
I have a great story from when I was a principal. I was a principal in a small community in a small school, but I had very, very wealthy, powerful people who had their children in my school. And I started a student government, right? And we were teaching the kids about government, what we knew about it then, and teaching them about how to govern. And so we were going to have our first elections for our student government. And I had one of those very powerful people come into my office, set up an appointment, come into my office, and she offered me the tuition of 2 students if I would rig the vote so her daughter could be her class president. Now,
Okay?
as I could have used the donation,
Right,
right?
right. You didn't
I
have to think twice, did you? You
I
already
didn't even
knew.
have to think twice because I figured that was the absolute slippery slope, right? Because if they bought me once, they would buy me 1,000 times over that, right? And I explained to her, I said no. And I knew her daughter well enough at that point to know that her daughter needed to she wanted to be treasurer. And she needed to do that on her own. She needed to have that confidence and that experience. And I said, she's going to probably win. I said, but she needs to do that. She needs to go through the process, and you need to let her. And so her daughter went through the process, and she was elected her class treasurer, right? She was over the moon with it. She was so excited. This girl that was so self-conscious and so not confident of herself was beaming with confidence. She was bubbling with joy and bubbling with just talking. I never seen her talk so much to people and friends, and came out of her shell. And her mother walked in my office 2 weeks later and handed me a check for the 2 tuitions for teaching her a lesson. How do you like that? So,
well, that's what comes from being true. That's what, she won that fair and square. It was real. It wasn't an illusion. It wasn't a lie. Okay. It wasn't something that was bought for her. It was something she earned herself. And so it had true meaning. And people have got to get this straight in their minds, and they also have to find their courage. The old Romans said that courage is the first virtue, because without it, you can't have any other virtue. If you don't have courage, when the lion comes to the door, you won't know what to do. If you don't have courage, when Satan comes to you and whispers in your ear, you won't have what it takes to stand back and answer.
right.
Okay. And so here was Lisa. She had courage. She knew that this very, very wealthy woman could cause her a lot of trouble as a humble school teacher, right? She knew that this woman could undermine her whole school.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But she still had the courage to stand there and say, no. And here's why.
Right.
And so she overcame with simple truth and courage and character and conviction. Now, courage, character, and conviction, 3 things that we need to build an assembly and to build a life that's worth living, a life that's real, a life that's true. If we don't have courage, character, and conviction, or what John Adams called commitment, then we might as well give up right now and, roll over and, let the nanny state treat us like so many cows and pigs to be brought to slaughter.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, later on, when I was in my family business, I had to go to China with my father. We had a wholly owned corporation in one time in China, and we had to meet with the district overseers of that district about our business. And as we were talking, I just kind of got this weird feeling that they were looking for payola under the table. And I took out a dollar bill and I shoved it under the table and I went, everybody in China knew what that meant. And I said, and I looked at him and I went, like I was going to get up. And I went, no, 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 no. Okay. That established the fact, simple language, I was not going to be bought and I was not going to be owned. And that was the way it went.
Yeah.
And we had no problems. None. So,
They were used to having Americans offer payola, is what that amounts to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I've been in a couple of situations where integrity and ethics were absolutely primary to getting the job done. And
Yes.
that's what our assemblies have to be. They have to
Right.
be impeachable.
Well, one of my favorite movies is The Outlaw Josie Wales. Because, so many of the especially the men in the Belcher family have had to be that kind of character. They've had to be outside of society because they were being basically suppressed. They were being hounded. They were being persecuted because of the information that they bore forward. And so I've told everybody, my husband Jim moved 12 times in 11 years when he was a child growing up because the vermin were seeking him, trying to kill him. And his father and mother were at a constant road rage, going from place to place to place to place, living basically as migrants to avoid these federal, not federation, federal officers who are trying to persecute them and do away with them.
Sure.
So, one of my favorite movies is Outlaw Josie Wales because he too was on the lam. And when he comes to meet the natives, when they finally get to a place of safety, then they have to face the natives, right? They've got the federales chasing them, but now they have to deal with the natives. Well, so he has this meeting with the local native chief, 10 Bears, and there's this wonderful scene where it all comes down that they're speaking the truth to each other.
Mm-hmm.
That they each have integrity, that they understand each other as men of honor, men of their word. And this is what matters, is that integrity, that honesty, and that courage. Now, John Adams was always saying, a person without commitment isn't worth the powder to blow him to hell.
Right.
Because if you're not committed to yourself and to your own honor and to your country and to your countrymen and to what you believe in, if you don't have some values that are worth valuing, and if you're not committed to them, then you can't build on sand. We hear that from the Bible about building on sand. And I think we need to step back a little bit and realize that if you're going to build a government on people, then those people need to be solid. Okay?
Absolutely.
We cannot build on sand.
Absolutely. Well, Anna, today we also had planned to talk a little bit, and this kind of is a good segue into what we planned to talk about mostly was about the difference between seatment and the misconceptions between the standing and the misconceptions behind the term seatment.
Yeah.
So if we could talk about that for a couple minutes and clarify that. Sure.
Okay, standing is having skin in the fight. Okay, standing is having a lawful, enforceable right or interest in an issue. For example, someone from Spain has a voice in what happens in Spain. They don't have a voice in what happens in Ireland. Okay, so standing is a fundamental issue. If you're just coming in and flapping your mouth about something that doesn't concern you, you're nothing but an opinionated busybody, right? But if you have standing, if there is some ownership interest or material interest or inheritance interest or whatever it is that makes you a valid commenter and a valid person of interest, is the technical legalistic term, a person of interest. If this makes you a person of interest and a person of substance, then you have standing. Okay?
Yes.
So you have an interest, number one, and you have substance, number two, and that gives you standing. So if you look around and you think about the concept of standing, well, what do you stand on every day? Just think about it. You stand on the land and soil.
Right.
So if you don't have land and soil, you don't have standing as a government or as an individual. And this is where the idea of statelessness arises. If you don't have land and soil that's your own, then you don't have standing and you don't have a state. Okay, you can't have a state without land and soil. So this issue of standing is absolutely crucial. And so is the difference between lawful and legal. Lawful is what happens between you and me. Lawful commerce, lawful trade, what some people call free trade, is what happens between me and you. There's no business face between us, okay? It's just me and Lisa cut a deal. I give her $10 and she gives me some radishes, okay? This is us doing business. All right? So that is a lawful transaction. I buy her house for X numbers of silver dollars, right? That is completely lawful business between two unincorporated business entities. We are acting as lawful persons. We're persons in the sense of, we have a separate entity, a name, okay? And we're doing business in our own name, right? Now, if you take that a step further, you've got something called corporate, but not incorporated, just simply corporate. And that means that you have another business person, and that's typical of unincorporated small businesses, little mom and pop businesses like Joe and Larry's Tire Shop that isn't incorporated and that is simply doing business as Joe and Larry's Tire Shop, right? So you have unincorporated, corporate, and then you have incorporated. And incorporated is what we think of with the entire spectrum of business models that were developed by the Roman Curia: cooperatives, foundations, trusts, S corps, B corps, nonprofits, all of that. That's all in the incorporated realm. So you got these three different kinds of businesses. Which one of them has standing on the land and soil? Which one is being operated by lawful persons? Okay. Which business is lawful versus legal? Okay, lawful is a higher standard.
That's right.
Okay, so which business is committed to lawful standards versus those that are committed to legal standards?
Your corporated business, basically.
Right, it's the
The
lawful, right, those that are engaged in trade, those that are engaged in lawful international commerce, but not as legal persons, as lawful persons.
Right.
All right. So, and the only ones that can have standing at law or in law are the living people and their direct personal lawful business. Everything else is legal. And legal is a whole different standard. So when we're talking about a lawful person, we're talking about you in your public persona doing business as Anna Maria Reisinger.
Right.
Or
Dorothy's Donuts.
Or yeah, Dorothy's Donuts, when it's just a mom and pop unincorporated family business where there's no incorporation, there's no state license, there's none of that other stuff that is part of the legal world. Okay?
Right.
So that's why the Amish should feel right at home with our vendors.
Exactly.
Right? They fit right in because they're all operating as lawful businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we want to go. Now, in the new world, there will be only two laws, the law of gratitude and the law of love. And there will be two courts, one for people and one for businesses.
Mhm.
And that's it. There won't be 80 million statutes. There won't be 80 million codes. All this stuff that has encumbered us and weighed us down and wasted hundreds upon hundreds of billions of dollars of human effort will be gone, like a giant burden taken off your back. But in exchange, you will have this very simple rule of treating others the way you would wish to be treated yourself. And you'll have this other very simple rule, which is to be grateful for all of the things, all the blessings that come into your life that are gifts. We're not aware of our gifts. This entire planet was gifted to all of us. Think of that. A gift. It was just a gift. All right? So everything you are and everything you have is a gift. Learn to be grateful for it. And in that gratitude, learn to give back. Learn to share. Learn to be gracious. Realize that whatever you gained by whatever you did was a gift. And as such, maybe you did your part by aligning with the truth or by bringing your soul into resonance with love. Maybe this is your entire shrine and glory, is that you made that choice and did that. But when you're looking at the material world and you're looking at the issue of standing, we're all inheritors of a gift.
Everything you needed to know, you learned in kindergarten.
Right. Right.
That was a book too.
That's a good book too, Now, think about others. Think about where you fit in. Think about your rights and don't be afraid to stand up for your rights. But at the same time, don't try to impose your opinions and your rights on other people. What's that old saying? My mom was constantly telling me as a kid growing up, your rights end where someone else's begin. It's a very simple little saying, but it's hard to understand. It's hard to put in motion in your own life without a lot of practice. Okay? You have to learn where those boundaries are, and you need to learn to live within them so that you're not projecting power that isn't yours. Okay? 9/10 of the squabbling that we see go on between state and county assemblies and between people within each assembly is simply that they haven't mastered that concept of the limitation of their own power and where the lines can be drawn with justice and where they don't exist. So just as our law, it was always based on the injured party. I had to serve as injured party so that all of these courts could be overcome. Jesus had to die on a cross so that sin and blame could be overcome. If you really think about it, the entire Christian story is about the overturning of condemnatory law. Law was brought to condemn mankind. It was brought to show us that we are incapable of obeying law. Okay? And it did. Here was Moses. What did he do? He came down from the Mount Sinai with 10 commandments. He promptly exploded that into 640 other little, dietary laws and laws about what kind of bath you had to take before this and before that. It became an entire huge roster of laws that you had to observe if you were going to be an observant Jew, and it made it impossible to be an observant Jew, right?
Right.
Okay, so what did Jesus do? What did he say he did?
2 commandments.
2 commandments. All right, so we couldn't obey 10. We couldn't obey all of the codes that were set down in Deuteronomy. Okay, we couldn't do all of that. Forget it. It was beyond us. We stand condemned under the law. So what do we need to do? We need to simplify things. We need to concentrate on what matters. We need to get real about our situation, who we are, what we're supposed to be doing with our lives, and how we're supposed to be treating this planet. And when we do that, we automatically come together. That's one of the effects. And the other thing is that we become humble. We realize that, all this hierarchy is nonsense. All this hierarchy is artificial. It's some sort of man-made construct that, like kids playing King of the Hill.
That's it. There it is. So, Anna, what is then your definition of seatment? If that's standing, what is seatment?
Well, standing is about your basic position, and whether you're an heir or not, whether you are the person who has an interest or not, all of that. Seatment is about organizational functionality. Okay, seatment is just, are you together enough to provide the functions that you ultimately want and need to provide the people that are living in your state of the union? Mm-hmm. And so there are the 4 pillars. Once you have your General Assembly, you're seated. Okay, you're at the table. You can now make decisions. And maybe that decision-making process will require you to enter a roll call vote for your state, that is being taken by the Federation. Okay, so the Federation comes in, they say, all right, we've got this international incident, or we have this situation like the transhumanism agenda, or we have this this housekeeping issue of enrolling the Western states as states of the Union. We come to you in your General Assembly. We place the question before you as the state government, and you all take a vote, and that's what happens. Okay? So you, as a General Assembly, you're already seated. You're already at the table. You're already able to vote, right? But when you have seatment, that's telling the world, okay, well, we're totally open for business. We are able to provide our own courts. We're able to provide our own defense, and we're able to provide our own business decisions. So we're here. We're open for business. We're doing all the functions that we set out to do. So that's the difference between being seated and seatment. Now, you can continue to function as a General Assembly, and you can provide the basics of seatment long before you're actually having any kind of formal seatment recognition. But this is a state issue. Seatment is a state issue, and only kind of as an afterthought or an official rubber stamp or whatever. It's only secondarily a federation issue. The real issue is, are you up to speed and functioning as an assembly?
Are you ready to go?
Yeah. Have you got all your pieces lined up, and are you functioning? Do you have a court system that can function? Do you have a militia that can function? Do you have an international business committee of state citizens that can make decisions for your state? This is the issue. It's not you're not chasing after some some little rubber stamp from me. The challenge is entirely within your state and within your organization.
Right.
And so you're already seated at the table through your General Assembly, but your seatment, whether you have all your functions in order and functioning, that's up to your state assembly. And then, it's just a matter of kind of raising your hand and saying, yeah, we got it all together, guys. We got our General Assembly is meeting regularly. Our militia is under development. We have militia members. We have, plans for our taking care of our people. We have our court system set up. We have a jury pool. We have justices. We have a clerk. We have a bail bondsman. We got it together here. We're moving. So some people got the idea that you had to, seatment had to occur before you were a real state. No. You're a real state the moment you bring together your General Assembly.
Right. So I've been asked before, how do you know when you're ready?
That's a good question.
And I said, well, you look around and you have a General Assembly and you have your General Assembly and you've got everything together and everybody kind of knows what's going on. And you've got your militia and you've got your International Business Assembly that's starting to really function and tell the internationally what they want done. And you look around and you go, I think we're there. And you have that conversation with your assembly that says, are you ready? Because ready means you're going to take, each and every one of you are going to take up your duty and you're going to work your assembly.
Right.
Okay. And when they all go, yeah, we're ready. We're there. I always say the difference is you quit asking, hey, Anna, are we ready? Hey, Anna, are we ready? And you say, hey, Anna, we're ready. Right.
And Anna
that's
says,
the difference.
Glory be, thanks to God. We're
But I will offer, Anna, if you want a great big rubber stamp, I'll design you one.
Well, yeah, it's an internal thing. Seatment is an internal thing to the state assembly, and you don't get any extra gold stars, the federation's approval or anything. All that really happens upon seatment is that the person who's been serving as your marshal at arms becomes a sergeant at arms. Okay.
We haven't done that yet. We haven't made that transition yet.
But it's the same basic function. It's, it's just a different jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. And then the coordinator becomes a liaison position where you just appoint someone to be the liaison officer that is in contact with the Federation, gives us a point of contact so that when something happens and some dust up in the international forums comes forward and we need to go back to the state assemblies and say, hey guys, what do we do about this? Here's the choices.
So let me I'm gonna be a little devilish here. So how is GFG going to handle that when we don't have a coordinator?
The GFG is just, they're learning all the different verbiage of our government along with everybody else.
Right.
And so they often have problems understanding, the difference between a coordinator and a chairman of the assembly, for example. Good. Or, they have problems understanding the difference between a liaison officer and a coordinator. So we have to explain that to them, and then they have to kind of internalize this and work with it. So, the only problems that I've seen with GFG are just those kinds of issues, because, these guys are bankers, they're IT wizards, they're all sorts of other things, but they're not necessarily cued into our verbiage and our structures. And, frankly, they're having the same struggles with countries all over the globe as they come on into the global family bank structure and establish their national banks. They have all sorts of different names and traditions and customs
Sure.
that we don't have.
Sure.
So they have to explain themselves to global too, so that global can adjust and know what they're talking about. Okay, so it's not that global is doing anything malicious. They're just not misunderstanding some of the verbiage sometimes.
Right. So, the other vehicle that probably would then have to be adjusted is also the adjustment between, instead of coordinator and liaison, to any information that's given in the coordinator's call, because that becomes another source where documents and different things are handed down, but only to coordinators at this point. So there's some transitions we're probably going to need to make along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And frankly, I've used the example of Ohio as you've got a situation where the coordinator has transitioned to the chairman. Okay. At some point, there'll be a need to kind of split the jobs up again, and everybody will be doing a more kind of a pinpointed, focused function.
Mhm.
But that whole process happens as you go from 6 members to 60 members to 600 members to 6,000 members to 60,000 members. You know, we're in a fractal world,
Right.
and as that expansion happens, suddenly you've got the largesse to pare down these gigantic jobs to a smaller roster of duties. Is less work for each individual is what it amounts to.
That's right.
And so
Many hands make light work.
right, many hands make light work, so bring on the hands, folks.
That's it.
There's this idea that our people are power mongering because they're sitting in all these different jobs. No, it's because they don't have help.
Right.
It's because we need 60 people instead of 6. It's because we need 600 people instead of 60. Okay? So we need more people to come on and to help, and we need to have the open mind and the right mindset in everybody to realize that these people are not here to compete with us. These people are not here to try to take over from us. These people are here to make a good faith effort to help with the work. Okay? If they're not here in good faith to help do the work, well, then we give them a timeout and tell them to readjust their thinking pattern. All
Right.
right?
And again, Anna, it's really important for each of us to, in a way, be a watchdog. If we see something that's not right, something that's not developing correctly, unfortunately, a lot of times the coordinators and a chairman are the ones that are pointing out, hey, that's not going right. You got to change, make a course correction here. And you get sometimes named a little bit of a bad guy for that. But it's really inherent in both of those positions that they step up and say, hey, let's make a course correction. Here's what's going wrong. Here's where you're off track. Let's get back on track, right? That's their fiduciary duty. So
the issue is also mindset. It's difficult to come in from a lifetime of indoctrination in a hierarchical structure that has certain assumptions about power and about authority and all of that, and to come into a different paradigm, a community-based paradigm, where instead of it being a hierarchy and where your power comes from occupying a position, Your power comes from what you know, from your experience, from your goodwill, from your integrity, and you're not functioning as a functionary. You're functioning as a neighbor, as a member of a community, as somebody who is there in good faith doing work, okay? Working for the benefit of all. And so it's an entirely different world. But people don't necessarily realize that they've entered the threshold of a different world. When they first walk in off the street, they're carrying all the burdens of the world, everything that they've experienced. They're carrying the burdens of taxation. They are, the victims of crippling assumptions about reality and about money and about all sorts of things that just simply aren't true, but they don't know that. They walk through the door and they've got all this it's like a coating of wrong ideas, wrong assumptions, very limiting, and for the most part, nasty assumptions about competition and getting to the top and dog eat dog and I'm better than you and I'm elite and you're not, or all this stuff. I'm white, you're not, and all this stuff, all this the elitism, the racial prejudice, the religious prejudices, all these different things. And they walk in the door like this. And it's almost like they have to be washed clean of this thinking, of this legalistic, ugly, competitive, mean-spirited, dependent, whiny mindset. I mean, I hate that mindset, by the way. It just drives me nuts.
I look at it as you put your pants on the same way I do every morning, one leg at a time, right?
Yeah. And so they have to be kind of scrubbed clean of this mindset before they can effectively navigate and be properly oriented toward participation in the world that we're building. Okay. It's so much simpler. Our world is just so simple. And their world is the ultimate in complexity. Our world is neighbors helping neighbors. Their world is this entire huge hierarchy from the top man at the top of the pyramid all the way down to the slaves at the bottom. Their whole world construct is exceedingly different than ours.
Right.
It's a complete inversion of ours, and so as we're sort of like the mouse trying to eat the elephant, but we have to go through this process of cleansing them from that indoctrination, and giving them new definitions and new ways of thinking and seeing things as they walk through the door. That's why orientation is so important.
Mm-hmm. So, Ann, I know we're running up right at I guess noon for you. I got just a couple of questions. Would you be able to answer those real quick?
Sure.
I think they're pretty quick
I
questions.
hope. I hope I could answer them quick.
Okay. Would you think it's smart to educate our people first before you do any assembly pillars like General Assembly?
Well, you have to educate them in tandem. You have to kind of hit the bricks running. But orientation and education are key to forming the kind of appropriate mindset that enables people to participate properly. The worst problems that we've had, some of the absolute worst fights that I have endured in this entire process have come from people who were well-meaning, people who had integrity and courage and were good people, okay? but they had deeply indoctrinated assumptions. And those assumptions had to be knocked down first before they could participate. So, yeah, you have to educate and orient people as they come through the door. And that kind of requires taking them by the hand and saying, okay, this is who we are, and this is how we're functioning. This is how our government is supposed to function. There are no kings here. There's no
Right.
hierarchy.
To begin with, Ohio, when we were working on trying to figure out who we are, what we were, and where we were going to go, we kind of met as an assembly of the whole to work on our documents. And as we were doing that, we were educating each other and getting things together. And then as we got some of our documents together, people started saying, hey, can we set up the education committee? Hey, can we set up the orientation committee? Can we set up the outreach committee? Can we set up? And in that, it kind of evolved in that way. But we continued working on our documents and inviting people to do that as a whole. And then that way, we learned so much from doing that activity, all of us together, having our input, discussing the issues, discussing the history, discussing the law. It was invaluable. It was an invaluable way to do it.
So, if you bring your people in, your new people, and you bring them together and you go over the documentation, how the documentation works, why it has to be done, they have a firm grounding. If they can see also the benefit in what you're doing, that gives them inspiration and makes them feel like, yeah, I should belong to this assembly and support it because look at what I'm getting out of it. Look at what it's making possible for me and my family.
Right, right. Knowledge is power, right? So, okay, so I've got another question from Jeanette Fisher. Can elected officers or coordinators be in the jury pool?
Certainly. Absolutely.
And I would say it would depend on what the issue is, though, too, doesn't it, Anna? Because there could be conflicts of interests in that.
Right. Right. So each case is different. In each case, you have a jury pool, right? All the possible jurors out there, and say that two of the jurors are related to the defendant. Okay, so this comes out in the process of questioning prospective jurors to sit on that jury. And the same thing goes with, elected officers, coordinators, say that some issue before the court is going to lead to discipline of a officer or a coordinator. Obviously, there's a conflict of interest. I was recently accused of a conflict of interest because I issued a Supreme Court order for a court of record, but that affected me, right? But a court of record is a court of record is a court of record. So it either exists or it doesn't. And it's really not an opinion, okay? It's an examination of records to see if the records are there. So yeah, whether there's a conflict of interest or not depends very much upon the issue that's being considered. And you just have to use your common sense in selecting juries to perceive if there are conflicts of interest or not.
Right. Okay. All right. Got another one. Please talk about spouses being on the same committee. Is that a conflict?
Not necessarily. Now, one of the problems that we have as startup organizations is that we have few people, and many people often wind up playing double duty. If you've got 50 members on a committee, it's a lot different than if you have 5. Okay? There is no intrinsic conflict of interest in spouses being on a committee. But you have to kind of look at the situation, and maybe it's appropriate, since you have very few people on a committee, that the two spouses take different roles and join different committees. You can certainly ask them to do that as a practical matter if you've got very few people on a committee and two are able to exercise an inordinate percentage of the vote. We have had, certainly in the past, and I assume that we still have, some situations where we have people playing three different roles and operating on two or more committees simply because we need the assistance and we need the help and we need the people, right? We don't have enough people to fill all the slots yet. That's just part of the situation. As we get more and more people involved, all of that goes away. And so I would encourage everybody to be sensitive to the perception that they're hogging authority, which is what people assume when they first come through the door, and they think this is a hierarchical structure because that's what they're used to, right? They see people and they think, oh, Ted and Mary are on three different committees and they're holding down two different offices. They're hogging authority. Well, no, they're not. They're trying to fill positions. And and 9 times out of 10, all you have to do is volunteer and join the committee and bring other people along. And pretty soon everything gets settled out right to normal. And you can go on with your business. And instead of it being something that occasions fear and accusations and all the rest of this, suddenly you've got a community and you've got a community government system that works just by you participating in good faith.
And I've seen committees where the husband and wife are on there and have very different opposite opinions, and sometimes they temper each other. So, it's really hard because we've all seen infiltration in our assemblies. We've seen good actors, we've seen bad actors in our assemblies going along. And it's hard to trust at times, and it's hard to get over sometimes those things that have gone on. But we have to have faith that as we work through and people begin to be educated and understand, that's where we temper each other. We don't necessarily go in and oppose each other, but we temper each other with knowledge and education and sometimes the law. We have to go in and say, hey, that's not lawful, and it's not lawful for this reason. So, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's just something that we as our assemblies develop, we just have to kind of breathe through a little bit. So.
Right. And it's almost like a mirror. When you see someone who's accusing someone else of lying, look at them more closely, because what happens is that people unconsciously reflect their own motivations and their own weaknesses and their own potentials for bad behavior.
Right.
So stop a moment and consider, okay, this guy is accusing him of lying. Is he a liar? Because you don't see in others what isn't in yourself.
Right.
All right. And learning to navigate that particular mirror face so that you can see that somebody else is lying and discern that. It's called discernment. Mm-hmm. If you can discern that someone else is lying, can you immediately discern why they're lying? That's a tougher job, and that's the job we're called to do, because oftentimes people are lying and don't know they're lying.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. They think that they're telling the truth, and according to what they know or what they believe that they know, they're not lying.
Well,
So
just remember, there's your truth, there's my truth, and then there's what is true, right?
at the very, very beginning of the book, you know something's wrong when, right? There's a little disclaimer. It's like the second or third page. And there's this guy standing there and, he's explaining this. There's the truth, the ultimate truth, that quite frankly, we're incapable of fully knowing. Okay? We're mammals, right? We don't get it all. There's an ultimate divine truth, all right? But we're not able to just step into that standard. What we do is we tell the truth as we know it, as we believe it to the best of our ability to be, okay? And this is one of the ways in which we're entrapped in their courtrooms, is that they force us to tell them that we're telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, but we don't really know the truth. So we're perjuring ourselves right out of the box unless we make an amendment to that and say, so help me God, or to the best of my ability. All right? So what you want to do is temper your view of the truth. Temper the fact that you don't always know the truth. Accept the fact that at various times in your life, you have certifiably, absolutely told a lie and not known that you were lying. And other people do this too. So when it comes to those sorts of things, let's take a little perspective and look a little deeper at ourselves and our limitations as living beings and as we are right now. Maybe
Right.
someday we'll know the truth.
I'm sure we will. Okay, I got one more question. Can I use a thumbprint instead of a picture for proof of identity? How about GFG?
Well, what we've pretty much limited that to is people who have a verified religious objection to photography. Now, there are some people who have a legitimate belief that it's wrong to capture an image of someone because of the prohibitions against capturing images in the Bible. They consider it a graven image when someone takes a photograph of them. There are other groups that have a religious belief that if you take a picture of someone, you're capturing an element of their soul. And there are still other groups that believe that if you take a photograph of someone, you're locking them into a time frame and place. So there are different religious groups around the world that have different prohibitions and reasons for those prohibitions against taking a photograph. The Amish have a restriction about taking photographs.
That's correct.
And so if you belong to one of those groups, we have allowed them to just use a thumbprint as an identifier. It's not recommended for people to try to do that outside those religious parameters or objections, mainly because although we have our own God-given real ID right here, our own personal seal given to us by God, okay, it makes it much easier for someone who is standing there without an ink pad and without the skills to read thumbprints to identify you as you're going through the gate to get on an airplane. And that's another thing. It's another reason why IDs only last for 10 years, is to make it easy for people to be able to identify us visually as we're going about our business. It helps to speed the flow of recognition, and it helps to cut down on wasted time and effort trying to identify somebody.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Well, Anna, that was our last question. We're going to let you off the hook today. So thank you very much for being with us. We're very grateful that you come and work with teaching us every week. And so we will see you next week, and we'll talk about what we want to talk about. Okay?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. All right. See you, everyone. Have a great Tuesday. Make it a productive week. We'll see you soon.
Agenda to be announced.
There you go.
All right. Well, take care, everybody. Hugs and kisses.
Bye.